Hey everybody, it's Christy, and today I have a very special guest. His name is George Brooks, and I'm going to bring him out to meet you guys.
Good
George, how are
evening.
you today?
I'm doing fine. How are you?
I'm doing great. Thank you so much for coming on. I really appreciate it.
Thank you. Thank you. No problem
Mhm.
at all.
So, I got to talking to George a little bit. This is not his first interview. He's kind of a veteran in the subject. So, I'm really happy that I finally get a chance to. And I'm going to give you the floor right now. Why don't you tell everybody a little bit about yourself?
All right. Well, my name is George Brooks. I am a mental health advocate. Um, I've survived mental health issues. I have a couple of diagnoses myself. I've survived childhood trauma, childhood abuse, addiction, uh, so much. And what I've gained from that is that I went through all that for a reason. And through that trauma and through that pain, I've discovered my purpose in life, which is to use that trauma to try to help and benefit other people. So I've made that my life's work. And I use that testimony and narrative to try to benefit people, all people, in any way that I can through my nonprofit Meta Association and through just my personal endeavors in every day and every interaction that I have.
And that's really admirable. I love that you do that. And I love that you take the struggles that you've gone through and you've turned them into something positive. You determined to not make your life and yourself a product of your environment. That's really admirable. So,
Right, right, right.
with that being said, what are your diagnoses? Do you mind telling us?
Well, my diagnoses are bipolar 1, PTSD, and dissociative identity disorder. And about age 7, that's when I began to have um, an idea that I was a little bit different. Um, in the sense that I noticed that when I would compare the way I would process emotions and my reactions were different than my peers. And that's really when the onset of my mental health issues really came to light at that early of an age. And I was blessed and fortunate in the sense that my parents were not the type to live in denial about mental health. So I was fortunate in the sense that I did get, attention. I did get care from an early age. So it did make that part of dealing with mental health easier. The problem came in when I dealt with outside society, when I dealt with the educational system, when I dealt with peers, when I dealt with religion. That was really, really heavy. So, but those were my diagnoses: bipolar 1, PTSD, and dissociative identity disorder.
And that is quite the collection, I will say. I have done some brief research on the dissociative identity disorder. Um,
Yes.
Would you mind telling a little more about that? Because it is not as well known as the rest of the mental health conditions on the list, that I would love for you to tell people a little bit more about that. More like what the symptoms are or what you do in those cases.
Well, dissociative identity disorder, just from my personal experience and what I've learned about it, they say it typically is initiated, caused, or the catalyst for it is childhood abuse or trauma. And what the best way I can describe it is that you feel detached. You feel it's sort of like an out of body experience when something that reminds you or takes you back to that trauma happens. So for me personally, the best way I can, well, I'll tell you one major instance where I had it. This was several years ago, and I was going through a lot of stress, and things were taking me back to some childhood trauma. I began to feel as though I was outside of myself. And this was going on for a couple days. It would come and go and come and go. But it got to the point where I was losing tracks of time. I was doing things and not remembering how it happened or how I got there. And it got to the point where I think I ended up 50 miles away from home and don't really remember it. I felt as though I was watching myself, as though I was in the corner of the room watching my life happen. And that was brought on due to stress. That was brought on due to childhood trauma. So I would literally dissociate from myself, and that's the best way I can describe it. So I know it may vary from person to individual, but that's my personal experience from it. So I think that ties into my purpose in the sense that I can articulate what my diagnoses are like, and maybe some people can help understand themselves better, and maybe it can help those who don't have a mental illness understand what we go through my testimony and my experience.
So there is something I want to point out when you said that. You made it very clear you feel like you're detached from yourself. And
Right.
the reason that I want to highlight that is because for people like me, I have CPTSD, which was triggered honestly less than 2 years ago. Um, I have severe PTSD to begin with, but something traumatic happened that triggered me to disassociate. But when I was disassociating, it was not from myself, it was from the situation. So
Right.
I would lose track of time the same way, but I still had a sense of self. So I want to highlight the difference between the two so that people who are listening and watching who may not know much, they know the difference. Because a lot of people say, "Well, I do that all the time. I don't remember what I did yesterday."
Mhm.
Well, it's not the same. So I just
It's
wanted
not
to
the same.
point that out. It is not the same. Um,
Yeah, and that's the thing about trying to spread awareness about mental illness. It's kind of like if you have, it's literally like you just said. People say, "Well, I forget stuff all the time," but there's a difference in forgetting to, turn the iron off, and you literally losing or separating something from something to the point where it's that. And this is a challenge in
it's like a
advocacy.
blackout,
It's so
kind
hard.
of.
Yeah. I think the longest amount of time where I was really, where I really disassociated from something was maybe a month and a half.
Wow, that must have been incredibly hard
It
when you
was,
came to the
it's,
realization. Like,
it's
what?
scary. Really, it was terrifying because I was married at the time, and I would, you know, my wife can tell me things I was doing, and it's like I don't what, it is terrifying. And at that time, I was going through so much. I was still in the throes of addiction. I was really not well, and to deal with those challenges, it's very, very difficult. And until we kind of get to where we're spreading awareness and breaking down the stigma of mental illness, we can't have the discussion about treatment. We can't have the discussion about equity. We can't have the discussion about you know uh, 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 accessibility to care and things like that until we get past this hurdle first. So we have to initiate those discussions, and that's what my purpose is, and the purpose of my nonprofit Meta Association.
Okay, so you did talk about treatment, and I want to highlight that. But first, I did want to say that I absolutely agree. The number one tool against the stigma is understanding. And in order to get understanding, we have to be more open about what we're experiencing as people who have diagnosis. They're never going to know or understand or want to understand if we're silent about it.
Right.
So it's so important to do things like this. And like your organization, we'll get into in a few minutes. I just wanted to say, because you said treatment, are you seeking therapy or in therapy for your conditions?
Yes, I am. Um, I've pretty much I'm a believer in therapy. The thing about mental illness is that it needs to be seen more as a health issue. It's criminalized to a certain degree.
Hmm.
Um, I also have chronic physical health issues. Um, one of them being heart failure, one of them being diabetes. Now, if I don't take my insulin, I'm gonna suffer. If I don't take my medication, I may suffer. If I don't get treatment for my mental illness, I will suffer. That's how I look at it. So for a long time, I neglected the talk therapy, the actually the counseling part of it. So I was just doing the medicinal part, but I wasn't doing the talk therapy. And until I joined the two, until I got over that barrier of my in my mind of actually opening up to a professional, it was not as effective. So once I made the correlation between the pharmaceutical part and the talk therapy, I was not successful, and that took time, and that took me getting over the stigma that I had in my mind toward the talking to a professional, the seeking the guidance, the coping mechanisms, the actual treating it like an illness instead of just this one thing that was just uniquely mine to hold on to. You have to treat it like it's an illness. You have to treat it like it's a disease, which it is.
And it absolutely is. I absolutely agree. So, my next question was going to be, are you taking or seeking medications?
Yes.
We already answered that. So,
Yes.
have so you said that the medications alone were not enough.
No.
So you feel that both of them together have really helped you with your symptoms?
Yes. And the thing about medication, let me address this, and I'm sure anyone dealing with a mental illness that has dealt with medications, we all have felt like this. It is frustrating as hell dealing with
Very.
medications. Here's why. With bipolar, on average, it takes about 10 years before you find a medicinal regimen that's really effective. We deal with the side effects. We deal with constantly changing meds. We deal with having to wait a couple months before it really kicks in. So, you know, I understand that part, but we have to try to stick it out. And we have to be honest with, when we deal with mental illness, a lot of our survival technique is dealt with manipulation. So we're not always honest with our clinicians.
That's right.
And when we learn to lie a lot, and when we're not honest with our doctors, especially when it comes to that medication, we're kind of shooting ourselves in the foot. So with medication, to all my brothers and sisters out there, we have to be more patient, and we have to be honest, and we have to give it a shot. When we're on the medications and we're doing okay, that's not the time to stop, because we're doing better because of the medication. We got to get out of the habit of saying, hey, I'm great now, so I don't need the meds. The meds are helping.
That's
If
right.
I'm taking my insulin and I'm feeling good, that's not the time to stop. So we have to find a balance between our talk therapy and our medication to be effective. We have to start treating it like the disease that it is.
I wholeheartedly agree. And we do have to be a teammate. Our doctors are our teammates. We are
Right.
not enemies. Yes, we are conditioned, like you said, to lie to them because we feel like we have to hide stuff because that's
Right.
how we're conditioned to believe that the mental illness that we have makes us a monster, or the things that we do because of our mental illness and the things that we're accustomed to living like, that affects us even with our doctors, but they are our teammates.
Yeah.
They are there to help us. And if you're doing something outside that you probably shouldn't have, you should still tell them.
Right.
Yes, they're going to discourage it, but at least it'll help them better understand what you're doing and why, because it may be a symptom of something else. You may not even control it.
And if you're
So it's always good to be.
Yeah, and part of that, self medication plays a big part in dealing with mental illness, because more of us do it than what we will admit. And self medication can look so many different ways, whether it be sex, religion, drugs, spending, anything. But you have to be honest and recognize when you are self medicating. Uh, Mine looks so many different ways, but it ultimately ended up being cocaine. But I
Same.
was honest about it. I didn't lie about it. I didn't bullshit myself or anyone. So that's why I'm able to talk so openly about it. So I can see it in other people. If you're spending, excessively, that's your way of self medicating.
Yep.
But one part of dealing with, and I know I may be branching all over the place. I
That's
apologize, but
okay.
the thing is, you have to transpose that addictive behavior into something more positive to get over addiction. You never stop being an addict, but you transpose it to something else. So what I've done, I've taken that addictive nature, that thing, and moved it over to finding a purpose and trying to help people. Because you never stop that crave, you never stop that yearn. It's in you. It was in you before. You just happen to take it and put it on something negative, but put it on something positive. You just find a new addiction.
That's right. I
That's all
agree.
you do.
And I'll
I
agree
mean,
with
it's
that too. Yeah.
yeah, and people try to cure addiction. You never cure addiction. You just move to something positive, and you see it all the time. It's often religion or something else. But oftentimes, we think us with mental we with mental illness, we have so many barriers, and we deal with so much, and we're so overwhelmed, and this is very difficult.
It is.
It's very difficult, and every day is a struggle. And not only do I see it, I live it. I live it, and I'm glad it's getting the attention that it's getting right now. And the only thing that concerns me is that we let this spotlight fade. That we don't have a sense of urgency in getting people the help they need, and then the next trend comes, and we
Right.
will have not taken advantage of this opportunity. So I want to thank you for bringing attention to this. So
Thank
thank
you. Thank you. This has already started becoming bigger than I ever thought it could be. And
you.
I'll
Yes.
tell you a little more about that later. But I wanted to move in because you did mention your meta association. Um, what is the biggest achievement that you're proud of despite your conditions and your symptoms? Would it be your meta association? And could you tell us a little more about it either way?
Sure. My biggest accomplishment is not necessarily related to meta. My
Okay.
biggest accomplishment is beating addiction. Not beating addiction, but overcoming it. But meta came to me, I believe it was divine. I started meta 4 years ago when I stopped smoking cigarettes. Cigarette money started meta. Um, the purpose of meta, the three tenets of meta are focusing on minority mental health because black men are typically underserved. Uh,
Absolutely.
and it's not at the exclusion of anyone, but me being a black male and seeing how we ourselves don't address mental health, I want to spread awareness there first. And then we branch out and help everyone else. So it's black mental health awareness because we don't address it at all.
At all.
Not at all, but
Mm-mm.
not like we should. It's about fatherhood, being good fathers, fostering mentorship, fostering brotherhood, and it's about fighting recidivism. It's about people that are released from prison that don't get adequate mental health care and don't have resources to be successful because all we're doing is creating a private economy based off humans. And that's wrong because when people are released and we don't have proper resources for them to be successful, what does that say about us? We're setting people up for failure. And to me, there's something just morally wrong about that. So I'm about meta associations is about spreading black mental health awareness among black men and all people. It's about fatherhood and it's about fighting recidivism. And I'm pretty much a one-man operation. I've been doing this 4 years. I've done it through a pandemic and through this economy. This past Saturday in my hometown of Memphis, we actually held our first event. Um, I'm very proud of that. And it's been hard, but it's a struggle, and we're growing and we're reaching people. So you can reach us at metaassociation.org, learn more about us, support. And I will go anywhere. I will speak to anyone, support us, and we're looking to partner with just anyone, spread awareness. Uh, we're about teaching, learning, growing, doing whatever we can to make sure that we help as many people as possible. So we are at metaassociation.org. We have our contact information. We have videos of our recent events. I also do public speaking, so you can reach me there for speaking engagements, life coaching, and If you reach out, I answer everything personally. I'm very accessible. So, like I said, metaassociation.org, METTA association.org.
And that's incredible. Like I'm blown away to
Thank
know that there's somebody out there who, despite a pandemic and despite everything else, is going strong and absolutely determined to make sure that minorities get the help that they need. And I absolutely wholeheartedly agree that they need it,
you.
and
Mhm.
that it's not paid attention to, and that it is ignored more than anything. So I thank you for that, and that's really admirable. So beyond that, I would like to say, because you do go through tough times, like you said, being a minority and how even being a man in general, men don't look at mental health like they should. They
We don't.
um they don't even express it. They're the man of the house. They're supposed to be the strong ones. They're never supposed to talk or say if they're weak or not feeling okay. That's not for them to do. Women, the emotional creatures, are. It's okay for women to not be okay, but not men. So, with that being said, is there anything that you do as a type of maybe coping mechanism on your own, other than the medication and the therapy, to help you in those times?
Yeah, self care is really important, and especially for men, we have to find things and create safe places for ourselves, whether it be solitude or anything, where we can have an outlet. And what I want to do through my nonprofit is create, spaces where men can come together, where we can congregate, where we can talk, where we, even if we need to be vulnerable, just amongst ourselves, to have an outlet, because for a long time we have ignored our own mental health. We have felt as though we can't express ourselves. We just have to find constructive, positive ways to do it. Men have always expressed themselves. It's just been we haven't found the best ways to do it. We hadn't found constructive ways to do it. So that's one thing I want to do is help us find ways to do it that are not only you know non-destructive, but maybe can foster something positive, and maybe in some ways in certain neighborhoods be profitable. So we have to maximize our efforts. uh, but every man needs to try to find a hobby for himself, not just a hobby but an outlet. For me, I'm a nerd. I'm into comic books. I'm a huge Batman fan. I'm a gamer. Probably this evening I'm going to do some gaming. Um, I spend time with my fiance. I have friends, a support system. Find people that are like minded, that are positive, that are trying to do something. Find people above where you want to be. Be
That's
around
right.
people that have aspirations. If you're around people that aren't doing anything, that's not mentally healthy.
Nope.
Surround yourself with things that are positive. Surround yourself with things that will inspire you. That in itself will mentally help you. Do things, go out. It's that in itself will help you so much. But find
That's so true.
outlets, self care, make time for yourself, find spaces just for you. So that's what's helped me. That's what I think will help most men. But we have to research and take time and process. Is so much involved. But that's what I think will be most helpful.
Very nice. So we're getting to the end of our interview here. I just have one last question for you to wrap up. Is there anything that you want to say to anybody who may have some of the conditions or symptoms that you have, to give them, inspiration or guidance?
Be patient with yourself. Uh, please be patient with yourself. Um, don't be afraid to be selfish. And what I mean by that, I don't mean selfish in the negative way. I mean be selfish in the sense of um, research your condition, listen to other people's narratives and other stories, realize that you are not alone, realize that you're not the only one. Be introspective, journal, try to get to know yourself and get to know what works best for you and get to know what's healthy. But be patient, it takes time. You're dealing with a chronic health issue that you will have for the rest of your life. You know what I'm saying? I have heart failure. I have multiple organ failure. I have diabetes. I have a lot I'm dealing with. I have to be patient every day. And even those of us who are not dealing with any issues, those of us who are perfectly healthy, we have to be patient with ourselves and each other.
Very, very true. Well, thank you so much for coming on, George. We really appreciate it.
Thank
And
you.
if anybody wants to find George, I will put his information in the comments there. And again, thank you, and we'll talk to you soon.
Thank you. It's been a pleasure. And everyone, have a blessed evening.
Thanks.